Hi y'all, my name is Mr. Chao, and welcome to Chao Time. I'm back with a brand I've been really curious about for a long time, and that is Seiko. This is the SBGP015. It's a 60th anniversary watch, and it's a limited edition. Big shout out to my good friend who let me borrow this watch. I really appreciate it. It's been really difficult for me to buy watches, and the channel is being held afloat by the generosity of those around me. So I appreciate my community very much. In order to buy the next watch, I need to sell the watches in my collection. And one way that you can see those watches is through my Instagram page, which is down in the description below. If you want to support the channel, one way that you can do that is by buying a watch. But if you can't do that, that's okay. A like and subscribe would also be greatly appreciated. The way I review watches is by objectively scoring them against the rubric that I've created. This gives me a total score. I take that total score and apply a value multiplier to get a value score. I then take those two scores and I rank them in all the watches that I've reviewed so far. And after that, I give a completely subjective opinion that includes all of my own biases and basically helps you to understand how I make my watch buying decisions. Before we can begin scoring the watch, we first need to think about the purpose and design philosophy behind the watch. This is kind of a sporty, casual watch that has a very classic look, but is also easy to dress down. So let's get to it. The first category is the case and bracelet's function and form. I'll be honest, this is the first watch that I had some unrealistic expectations of. I'll discuss this in the brand section later. But the quality of a Seiko precedes it. I'm glad to say that this stainless steel case has a unique and original design language with some amazing finishing. The brushing and polishing are completely separate, even with a 60x jeweler's loop. This, of course, is made possible by the Zaratsu polishing technique. There's a lot on the internet that talks about Zaratsu being a mirror polish technique, but the information that I saw from Seiko seems to suggest that it is what helps the brushing and polishing to remain completely separate. The polishing is almost completely flat, and the brushing is so uniform and silky. The angles and curves of the case work well together, but the bracelet does not seem to match in terms of style or the quality of the finish. The scissor-to-point clasp is well made though. In fact, when looking at the bracelet as a separate entity from the case, it's very well made. It just has some clashing design philosophies. The screw-down crown gives the sports watch 200 meters of water resistance, which is greatly appreciated for a daily wear companion. The crown is very grippy, but does seem a bit small. I did not unscrew the crown to check changing the time or date, but that shouldn't be necessary for such an accurate quartz watch anyway. The crown does have a very deeply engraved logo, which looks great. The bezel is ceramic and a dark deep blue. It fits the design language of the case beautifully with its matching angles and shine. Sitting within the bezel is a flat sapphire crystal with an anti-reflective coating on the interior. Pretty much everything you would expect to see in terms of technology is present and well executed. 9 out of 10 for form, 8 out of 10 for function. Let's move on to this dial. Seiko dials are also the stuff of legends. This one is one of their more subdued offerings in terms of dial texture, but it does have that same deep blue found on the bezel. It has a faint sunburst effect that you have to catch at certain angles in order for it to pop. The Seiko logo is applied, while the text underneath is printed. Both are of a high quality. In fact, the printing might be the best I've ever seen on a dial. It is sharp and stands tall enough to cast a shadow when I use my studio lights to look at it through the loupe. The applied indices have various angles to complement the design, and each is filled with blue Lumibrite. There is a little bit of an imperfection on one of the indices, which is common on other watches, but let me down because of my extremely high expectations for Grand Seiko. I love how the dial seems to have two different personalities depending on the amount of light. When in a darker room, the indices reflect so much light that they seem larger, overtaking the dial a little bit. When well lit, the lume becomes the center of attention, and the dial seems much more elegant and uncluttered. The hands are much like the indices, expertly finished, angular, and with a bit of lume in the center. The red second hand ticks away once per second in a muted but surprisingly classy way. 10 out of 10 for form, 9.5 out of 10 for function. Let's move on to this quartz movement. The 9F85, a new quartz movement introduced in 2020, is rated at plus or minus 10 seconds per year, and due to the high accuracy, has a function that allows you to adjust the time without stopping the seconds. Grand Seiko markets this as a way to adjust the time without affecting the watch's accuracy. In order for the movement to drive the second hand, which is apparently large and heavy for a quartz watch, smoothly, and without the wobbling associated with quartz, Grand Seiko has implemented a double tick mechanism. The second hand ticks twice a second, nearly back to back. The quartz that is at the heart of time regulation is also highly specialized, as it is specially chosen for its temperature resistance, increasing accuracy. Honestly, I could go on and on about this movement, but we just don't have the time for it. Let's just say that it's a quartz movement packed with technology and engineering. The movement is also well finished, but as you may have guessed, these pictures are not of the movement in this watch, so it's hard to say for sure. 5 points for form, 7 points for function. So far, that's 48.5 points out of 60. Let's move on to the most objective category, the brand heritage and prestige. Grand Seiko was originally a brand of Seiko created to compete with the major Swiss watchmakers. At first, Grand Seiko, along with King Seiko, tried to compete with the Swiss on their own terms. But after they swept the Swiss chronometer competition, the Swiss changed their rules and did not allow any watchmakers outside of Switzerland to compete. In the ensuing years, Grand Seiko continued to push the boundaries of watchmaking, iterating and improving their quartz and automatic movements. In the early 2000s, Grand Seiko started using the spring drive, a combination of quartz and mechanical movement technologies borrowed from their parent company, Seiko. More recently though, Grand Seiko has become famous, and indeed synonymous, for extremely high-quality dial and case construction and finishing. In fact, among enthusiasts, the company has become a bit of a rising underdog, becoming almost legendary for producing watches that compete well above its price range. All the while, the company seems to be marching to the beat of its own drum. Their watch styles are unique, and the technologies they implement at this price point are unmatched. For being so highly rated among enthusiasts and for having a relatively large group of hardcore fans, Grand Seiko scores a 8 out of 10 for heritage and prestige, bringing the total score to 56.5 out of 70. The SBGP015 is a limited edition watch produced for their 60th anniversary and is no longer in production. They can still be found from $3,000 to $4,000 and are still available as of the making of this video at some Grand Seiko boutiques. I'll use 3,500 to calculate the value multiplier. The calculations bring the value multiplier to 1.059, and the value score is therefore 58.245, placing it near the middle of the pack in the value scores. So that brings me to my personal opinion on the watch, and what an amazing quartz watch this is. I'll get this out of the way right away. I think that I am a snob for automatic watches, and so this quartz watch is fighting the current of that kind of opinion. And it's unfortunate because this opinion is shaped by the industry and the groupthink associated with placing automatics at such a on such a pedestal, essentially. And I don't want to conform to this kind of herd mentality, but at the end of the day, it's hard to reverse an opinion that you already have. And so that's where I'm struggling internally on this watch. The watch is really beautiful. It's sized wonderfully. I've said it before and I'll say it again. For my 6.5 inch wrist or 16.5 centimeter wrist, a 40 millimeter case size it's almost perfect. It is small enough to be kind of unobtrusive, but also has plenty of wrist presence. I think the bezel adds a nice little bit of flashiness to the watch. The dial is really nice. The red second hand adds just that little bit of contrast that is really, really appreciated. I like the mix of Grand Seiko-esque indices, but with that strip of lume in the center. I love lume on watches, and that is oftentimes one of my major complaints of Grand Seiko watches. But the real star of the show here for me is the case. The case shape, the size, the finishing, the angles. It's just a really, really nice looking watch. I really, really love the case on this. The bracelet is a little bit out of place, but I can forgive that. It just doesn't go really with the angles of the watch. It looks like a bracelet that is just made for any Grand Seiko, and especially the end link where it comes into the watch, it just doesn't really look like it fits, but I can deal with that. So would I spend my own money on this watch? And I think I would have to say no. In fact, I'm pretty sure. And that's because with my new philosophy on kind of curating a slim collection, where each brand is only represented once, maybe twice at most, I would really want a spring drive. And if this watch had a spring drive in it, it would be near the top of the list in terms of Grand Seikos. I really like a lot about it. I just wish that it was either a spring drive or an automatic. So, do you agree with the scoring? Is there anything about the rubric that you would change? Are there any watches you'd like to see me review? Thanks for watching. Thanks for making it to the end. And I appreciate you. Bye, y'all.